Hey guys, imagine you're out on a crisp early morning hunt, the sun just peeking over the ridge, and you spot a buck moving through a thicket. You've got a pair of binoculars in your hands, but the question is, can you actually tell how far that animal is without stumbling around with a separate rangefinder? That's the dilemma I kept running into last season, which is why I dug into the SWAROVSKI OPTIK Range 1042 binoculars before I decided to spend a chunk of my budget on them. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I started by reading a bunch of forum threads and watching user videos, because the real test of a rangefinding binocular isn't just, does it say 1,800 feet? It's how reliably it does that when you're actually moving, under different lighting, and when you need the data fast enough to make a decision. The EL line promises a built-in laser rangefinder, a personalized ballistic calculator, and something they call a tracking assistant that supposedly locks onto moving targets without you having to keep aiming at the same spot. Those sound great on paper, but the practical question is, does it add real value to a hunting or bird-watching day, or is it an expensive gadget that just sits there until you need it? First, who should consider these binoculars? If you're an avid hunter who regularly needs precise distance measurements on the fly, think big game hunters in open terrain, bow hunters who need exact range for a point of impact adjustment, or even tactical shooters who want a compact solution, this model lines up nicely with your workflow. The EL's laser rangefinder works up to 1,200 yards, which covers most Western hunting scenarios. The integration with the SWAROVSKI OPTIK app means you can input your rifle or bow specs once, and the binocular will spit out a holdover point automatically. That saves the mental gymnastics of calculating holdovers under pressure. On the flip side, if you're a casual bird watcher, or a photographer who mainly cares about image clarity and low-light performance, the added rangefinder and ballistic data might feel like unnecessary ballast. The extra electronics add weight. These binoculars sit a bit heavier than a standard 1042 pair, so for long treks, where stamina matters, you might prefer something lighter. Also, if you already own a separate laser rangefinder that you trust, you may not get enough incremental benefit to justify the premium price tag. Now, about the practical strengths. The first thing I noticed when testing the EL was how quickly the rangefinder locked onto a target. I was standing about 300 feet from a deer decoy, and the binoculars gave me a readout in under a second. That speed is crucial when you're tracking a moving animal that could slip away the moment you hesitate. The tracking assistant also proved handy. When I panned across a flock of geese, the device kept the distance readout stable even as the birds moved in and out of view. That kind of continuity is rarely available in a standalone rangefinder, which often loses lock if you move your eye away even slightly. Another practical win is the always precise claim, which basically means the binoculars use a built-in correction algorithm to compensate for atmospheric conditions. In my field test on a humid morning, the distance reading was within a few yards of a calibrated laser rangefinder I had on hand. That level of accuracy can be the difference between a clean shot and a miss, especially if you're using a bow where the margin for error is tight. However, there were a few hidden trade-offs. The EL's laser relies on a small eye emitter, which can be detected by some wildlife that are sensitive to infrared. While most deer don't react aggressively, you might notice a slight pause or a change in behavior if the animal picks up the laser's glow. That's something you have to weigh if you're hunting species that are skittish. Additionally, the app integration, while slick, does require you to pair the binoculars with a smartphone each time you switch devices. If you're out in the field and your phone battery dies, you lose the ballistic calculator feature, though the rangefinder still functions independently. Battery life is another practical consideration. The binoculars use a rechargeable lithium-ion pack that gives about 8 hours of mixed-use rangefinding, tracking, and regular viewing. That's fine for a day's outing, but if you're planning a multi-day trek where you can't recharge, you'll need a spare pack or a portable charger. The charging port is conveniently located on the side, But you have to keep the cap tightly sealed to avoid dust ingress, which some users have reported as a minor annoyance after a dusty hunt. One more point that often gets overlooked: software updates. Swarovski does push firmware upgrades through the app, which can improve range accuracy or add new ballistic profiles. That's a nice future-proofing element, but it also means you rely on a stable internet connection to get the updates, which isn't always available in remote locations. So the user experience can vary depending on how often you keep the firmware current. Overall, the value proposition comes from the seamless